No, the governor needs to be the person who represents the administration and uses that to make sure that the communication between administering and the people he is helping, because individuals can't administer big projects. America is a big project. The world is a big project. So institutions today need to start thinking big the way we want the global institution to be thinking while they are planning the second human evolution. Okay? There's a lot we have to do, but we start with you and me. We have to start with our own ability to care, actively care with our hands.
Welcome to Sustainability Transformations podcast, where we explore bold ideas to drive positive change for people, the community, and business. Today's guest is Jeffrey Charles Hardy, the founder of the Care for Peace Foundation, global change agent, medical planner, and author of To Care for Peace. His work asks a bold, urgent question: can we plan the next stage of human evolution? And if so, what does the plan look like? And the key theme of our conversation is to explore how humanity can move beyond short-term crisis management, which from a sustainability point of view is a critical topic, and begin intentionally designing our collective future. So what Jeffrey brings is the second human evolution. Jeffrey, thank you for joining us. Let's start with a big one. What exactly do you mean by the suspended human evolution, and why is now the time to talk about moving into the next phase?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me to join your wonderful podcast. I like the title, and I like you, so this is perfect. I have to back up a little bit in that question because I have coined the expression that there are three stages of human evolution. And the first thing I have to dispel is that it has nothing to do with the Anthropocene. It has nothing to do with the Holocene. It has no relationship to geology. So it's just us, the three stages, because I was kind of stuck trying to talk with people about what it is that we need to be doing in a way of planning humanity in our next steps. So cut the chaff out. Let's talk about geology some other time, but now let's talk about humans because it's the humans that are messing everything up. So the first human evolution began 2.5 million years ago. And that's that's when we were sticking sticks in the ant hole and eating them. That's the beginning. I mean, we were still animals, and what's the difference between a human and an animal? At any rate, we evolved. I'm not so sure we can even say that we became civilized, but we certainly tried to become civilized. And so by the time we got to the mid 60s of the last millennium, we had mutually assured destruction. We had already really conquered nature. We had seen the whole world. We knew that the world is round. So what we end up with at the end of the 60s is what I'm calling the suspended human evolution, which is okay, we're still kind of dragging our feet in the first human evolution, but we haven't really gotten to the point where we're doing anything other than twiddling our thumbs and trying to figure out what's next. And I think there's a lot of what's next attitude as it comes to status quo. It's going to come from somebody else. It's not something I have to do. So what I'm saying, as a 50-year veteran healthcare planner, health facility planner, management engineering planner, that we need to use the same type of tools that I was using for all those years and plan the second human evolution. And now I have had this conversation for many people, with many people, and I think that the thing that a lot of times comes up, other than who are you to say, which I totally respect. I don't know many people who've had all this planning experience, but I figured that at least I've got that planning experience. But something else happened during this whole process of planning. I saw what worked and what didn't work. I saw what we should use in designing the second human evolution and when we shouldn't. What are all the mistakes we've made? And the people I meet, like you, I hear all sorts of other mistakes that we shouldn't make and all sorts of things that we should do. But that's the conversation that we should have. So the suspended human evolution, which you asked me about, is exactly what you are doing with me right now. We're talking. We have to talk. We have to compare notes. We have to invent some new languages, some new tools for the discussions that are ahead. And that's called pre planning. We're not planning right now. We're just pre planning. And so I hope that answers your question in a nutshell.
That's great. So it was clear what evolution is, what the suspended is. So walk us through what is the second human evolution then?
Well, I'm going to be as honest as I possibly can and say, I don't know. I don't know. On one hand, as a planner, I have created some tools which I have written about in my book, which is called To Care for Peace, a global mandate to secure the second human evolution in perpetuity. And in that book, I have written 4 templates. And these templates are tools that we can use during the pre planning phase to direct our conversation. Because if we don't have the tools for the discussion, then it's a new kind of Tower of Babel. And if we don't have tools, and by the way, these tools, you could disagree with my tools. I don't care. The point is that that's part of what we have to do. We've got to think about what those tools are and say, well, I'm not going to use a hammer. I'm going to use a screwdriver. Yep, that's fine. The idea is we have to build something, and it's called the second human evolution. And when I was building hospitals, I had people all over the world sitting at my table because I'd work in Bahrain and the Persian Gulf, Nigeria, Kenya, Vietnam, Myanmar. These are places where I worked after working for about 30 years in American hospitals. And I'd have all these people sitting around the table, and I had to change my tools all the time. And so we had this whole tool development process that is part of the pre-planning process because you can't just jump into planning when the left side of the table is talking inches and feet and the other one is talking metrics. You got to decide what tools you're going to use when you're planning a hospital or a healthcare system or a clinic or a doctor's office. It doesn't matter. So okay, so you bring these tools to the table and you talk about what tools you're going to use to plan. And that's really what we have to do now. Because when you ask me, what is that second human evolution? What language you want to talk about? Are we going to go into some real failure avoidance? Because that's probably the most important thing we're going to have to do. Here's what we don't want. We don't want to build a whole bunch of houses or buildings or whatever right by the ocean because the ocean is rising. Well, it's rising now. Maybe it'll recede. Within 200 years, the ocean will start receding. I mean, there's all sorts of things that are just complete unknowns that we might need to bring into the discussion. And these are things that, by the way, other people are coming up with and sharing with me. So that thing about the ocean receding, I went, oh my gosh, somebody was serious about that. It was a scientist sitting at the table with me saying, oh, sure, oceans go up and down, all the time. And then when I say all the time, I'm talking, the geologic time of, 10 million years, 100 million years. So how much are we going to be looking into the deep future, or what's the future that we're going to be talking about? Is the second human only 10 years away? Is it 500 away? What are we going to have to do between now and when we really get started with the second human evolution in order to make sure we can even get to the beginning?
You mentioned at the very start, is not Anthropocene, but how is the second human evolution different from the environmental or typical geological paradigm?
Well, we would have to look at humanity and what we've done so far. What we've done so far is we've just done everything to our advantage. It's survival of the fittest, and kill for peace. And that is something that we've got to really get away from. Survival of the fittest is going to have to evolve to survival of the planet. And care for peace, which is the title of my book, it's the name of my foundation, the Care for Peace Foundation, and it's the title of the song I wrote for Burmese children to sing at the grand opening of their health center. I mean, Care for Peace is something that is so important in this process because you have to bring the feeling that you have of caring for your peace and for the peace of the people around you. You have to bring that to the table. And we have to discuss that as part of this pre-planning phase too. So I don't think that we can deny the fact that we're making a geologic impact on the planet. Yeah, I mean, you look at the cross section of a big tree and you see, oh, here's where Christ was born. Here's when the Magna Carta was signed. You can see these big circles in this cross section of the tree. And right here at the outer edge where we are, we're destroying the tree. Oh, we've got to realize where we are in this stage of evolution, which is we're the destructors. We're the ones who are changing the geography, the geology. So it's up to us. It's our job. And when religious people sit at the table with me, I always say, please bring your gods along. Bring Buddha along, bring Jesus along, bring Muhammad along. These are our beliefs that we need to bring to the table. And one of the things that I have a problem with Karl Marx is the whole process that he was talking about where it's to everyone according to their needs and from everyone according to their ability, and no religions, get the religions out of here. What I think is that, look, spirituality is something we need, so please bring your spirit, bring your spirituality, bring your belief systems, and let's talk, let's share. Pope Francis started this process of getting together with other religions. He's gone, but he started a process that is going right now while we're talking, of talking among other religions. I mean, it's already beginning. Everything that I'm talking about, there's no pie in the sky here, folks. It's happening. And the process of planning is happening in small ways. The United Nations, the World Health Organization, individual countries are trying to plan, but the problem we have is that we don't have a global planning process. And that's something that we have to work on, knowing that we are messing with the geology and we better, and the environment, the trees, the forests, the oceans, and we've got to include that as well. We know it now. We don't have to pretend that it doesn't exist.
You argue that the problem is we don't know how to plan the next phase. What do you mean by that?
What do we mean by planning the next phase?
You made the argument that humanity doesn't know how to plan the next phase, which is the second evolution. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, my planning tools that I used in healthcare were adaptive tools. Many times inside the country, I would be talking to professionals that I was used to working with. I know what a radiologist does. I know what an architect does. But if I'm out of the country, outside the country, there were a whole lot different professionals with that I was trying to work with. And so I'd have to work on the way we communicate first. So if we're talking about planning, number one is the tools for communication. Then we can talk about the tools that we need to communicate specifics. And, it's like what I was saying about, metric, versus inches and, the way we're doing here in America. That's something that has to be agreed upon. So there are some basics. I can work with the Muslims in Bahrain. I was in Bahrain for 1 year with my wife, and we worked with people all over the east seaboard of Saudi and UAE, Doha, some of the places over there. And so it was very important for me to understand the culture because there is definitely a culture. I'm a Christian, but I had to understand and I wanted to understand the way that the people who brought in their prayer rugs, they needed a place to do their prayers 5 times a day. So that was part of it too. I had to understand the culture. And by the way, they started understanding my culture too. So this whole process is the the most important thing that you can do during pre-planning. Otherwise, you're going to be at each other's throats, or you'll be stepping on people's toes because you won't have thought about the person that you're working with. This is no different than getting to know anybody, but you can't overlook it. You can't just say, "Oh, let's not do that." And in my healthcare business, I constantly was coming up against a planning process where they hadn't done any of the pre-planning correctly, and that's really messed the whole project up. The process is the solution. I even write that on the bottom of the book because you have to understand the importance of process, and you better start the process in that pre-planning and don't give it short shrift. Take your time. And what we're doing right now, is part of this process. You are really masterminding a process that no president in the country, no general secretary of the United Nations is doing right now. These guys are way up there in charge of big organizations, big silos. You're not. You have a breadth and depth of a discussion that needs to occur in order to us get to the point where we can pre-plan the planning tools that we're going to need to use to plan the second human evolution. And during that process, we're going to have to deal with the big global problems and the small global problems and the national problems and the segmented problems like overpopulation, overconsumption, overmilitarization, overburdening the planet's resources. There are so many categories of planning that we are going to get involved in. This process that you're doing is absolutely integral to this whole pre-planning effort that is definitely going to take my lifetime, the rest of my lifetime, and probably yours, to be able to get to a point where we're able to start that planning process. Which your next question is, well, when do we start? How do we? There's so much happening right now. We better start soon. And that's part of the pre-planning process. We need to look at what critical problems are that are global and how those global problems are affecting individual people wherever they are, wherever they live. Because you can look at the seaboard of Florida and realize that global warming is making the seas rise. But you could also look at the eastern seaboard of India, because India is also affected too. You can also look at the western seaboard of Myanmar that has mangrove swamps, more mangrove swamps than anywhere else in the world. How are we going to take care of the mangrove swamps that are unbelievably important to the flora, the fauna, the replenishing of the fishing supplies? I mean, it's unbelievable what we're going to have to do, but we're starting the conversation. You are helping start that conversation.
As a break. If you're finding value in this conversation with Jeffrey, don't forget to subscribe to the Sustainable Transformations podcast and share this episode with someone who cares about our future as species. Let's spread these big ideas because change starts with shared understanding, as Jeffrey just mentioned. So one of the key parts of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is peace, and I believe it's number 16. Now, how, based on your decades of experience, how can humanity, from a sustainability point of view, pursue peace as a repeatable system and not just some ideal?
Thank you for that question, because that's something that has been so much a part of me since probably when I was in the United States Coast Guard Reserve as a hospital corpsman trainee. In other words, I like a nurse. And first job was delivering bedpans to sick guys who were coming back from Vietnam, and eventually helping do nurse type duties, including give shots and medicines and change dressings and everything. And at the end of the day, I had a feeling, and I just couldn't put a finger on what that feeling was until I realized that the answer is really simple. Because I was caring all day, I had this feeling of peace at the end of the day. And it wasn't just peace at the end of the day, it was during the process of caring. And I suddenly, it just kind of came to me that, wow, active caring promotes dynamic peace. That is what we all have to recognize will eliminate this whole problem of killing for peace. If we can recognize just our own need to care for peace, but actively care for peace. We can care about the starving people in some foreign country. That's a wonderful thing to feel and say, I'm going to go to church and I'm going to pray for them. That's nice to pray. But what we have to do is we have to do. And that's the caring process, the process that is the solution to help us get to a dynamic peace that we can all share. Because if we can all share peace, and that's our shared goal, there's going to be none of this garbage about agreeing to disagree. That's the most absurd concept that as anybody has ever come up with. What do you mean that agree? No, 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 no. Humanity as a whole, since 2.5 million years ago, has killed for peace, but we've also been working on being civilized human beings. And what that means is that we work together until we agree. you know, and we can agree to live together with our different beliefs. We can agree to work together with our different tools. There's all sorts of things that we can do, but we do not agree to disagree. Now, if you want to agree that you're going to sleep on it or you're going to come back to the issue tomorrow, that's fine, but none of this shutting off. We've got to care for peace, and that's active living care, active care living, so that we have that peace. And I'll tell you now, I am at peace. And I have grandkids living with me. I have children living with me. I have all sorts of reasons to not be at peace, but I am at peace. Don't talk to me about happiness. I think that's grossly overrated.
Yeah, people chasing for happiness. What are the first few steps we can take to initiate this second human evolution, whether at the institution level, the national level, or at the community level, would you say?
What I like about your questions is that you are the answer to most of your questions that you're asking me. Really. And it sounds funny, like, what's he saying that again for? But it's what we're doing right now. We've got to back and forth. We've got to communicate. We've got to share what we believe and what we know, because what we believe is something that we have until we know something. Belief is a prerequisite in a lot of times for knowledge. I believe that God is the essence of the human spirit. You think about that. I can talk with a Catholic, a Muslim, you name it, a Jewish person, and say, look, if we talk about the essence, that in the beginning stuff that John in the Bible, John 1:1, said that in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God. Well, you know what? In the beginning, there was the essence. And it was that essence that someone said, let's call that God. Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, you could say essence instead of God if you want. Or you could say essence instead of Shiva or Muhammad, and it's like if we start using our understanding of our own nature and where our own nature comes from, then be able to communicate. We'll be able to share this stuff with each other. As I say, it's what you're doing right now.
Where do you see not just government? What other roles can you think of from a citizen's level to contribute to this evolution?
Well, yeah, institutional. Am I hearing you right? What can institutions do? Am I hearing you right? Because I think that one of the things that institutions have to do is look at their ability to really represent the people that are in their purview, in their realm. One of the things that I say in the book is that a government really needs to strive to be as good as the best person it hopes to represent. I'll say that again. A government must strive to be as good as the best person it hopes to represent. Now, that's a government of a nation, or it's a government of a church or a synagogue or I don't know, neighborhood community center. I mean, they've got to have the leadership representing the government because they're the governors. I I have a problem with the word president, and I know I'm a president of a nonprofit corporation, but I should be really calling myself a executive director, I guess, but I like the word governor because a governor is a word that he's in charge of governing. He's got the rule books and he's saying, okay, let's see, what's the rule here? Now, is this something that I should be doing? I mean, you look at what Trump's doing in the United States, and he doesn't have a rule book. And I mean, we've got the Constitution, but I think that a governor of America, not a president, but a governor would be saying, okay, now this is the passage that talks about the Second Amendment, excuse me, the right to bear arms and all this. Well, let's look at that and see if this is what the people that I'm trying to represent. And that's where the discussion will begin. And this is where the leader needs to be the one who cuts through the chase, not throw crap at people, not come up with new definitions that are not what people understand and not what people think about. And what are you talking about? It's like we have elections and say, oh, it's all illegal and, they were screwed up and somebody threw a wrench in it and there's a lot of cheating here and there. No, the governor is helping because individuals can't administer big projects. America is a big project. The world is a big project. A lot we have to do, but we start with you and me. We have to start with our own ability to care, actively care, with our hands, with our capabilities, with our money for peace, the dynamic peace that everybody needs to be a part of. If I don't have peace, then you don't have peace. That's got to be one of the most important things that we realize. We can deny it, but once we know that denial is part of our spirit, you'll never be able to deny again.
As a final thought, where can listeners find more of your work, Jeffrey? If they like your book and the conversation, can you direct them to find more or to contact you, please?
Well, they can go first to my primary website, which is careforpeace.com or careforpeace.org. And you'll be able to read a lot of stuff that I've just been saying and learn a little bit more about what Care for Peace, the foundation, has been doing. And I think that the Care for Peace book is available on Amazon, both in Kindle as well as hardback. There's email address in the back of the book. Send me an email and I'll send you a copy of the templates.
Huge thank you to Jeffrey for the incredible insights.
Thank you very much.